Well, it's always a great treat for me to be able to get an invitation to come back to a place that's special in our hearts. And, I received a lot of education from a one-room school in Birmingham, Alabama. They only allowed that church. It was a miracle story because, the Adventists wanted to build a church on this beautiful piece of property. And other people wanted it too, so how are we going to get it? And it was, they said, well, a group of people that will build a school here, we'll sell it to them. And that's the first building they built, was a school on that property. And I was in the graduating class. It was a 4-grade school, and I was a part of the last class that attended that school. And then went over to Brakeworth after that. Every school has its story, and I'm excited that Christian education has been a part of my life, but the practical side of education started when I came to Huntsville, and we were fresh out of seminary and had all of the book learning and experience. But it's when we came here to Central that the practical side of education started. That was in 1979 that it was a significant year. You probably remember 1979. The University of Alabama won the national championship. I was excited about that, and the next day I enrolled at Andrews University. So that was pretty special. It was a whole new world. It's in Berrien Springs, Michigan. And this southern boy had never seen snow or cold weather, and I enrolled in January of that year. Also, 1979 was a pretty impactful year here in Huntsville, Alabama, because a transition took place. And I heard the story several times when I came here, both from the pastor that was here at the time, the first elder who was right there and had told me the story, but also from his daughter, who was a classmate of mine at Southern. I'm glad that story has been preserved for you, and it's available in the lobby. God has done great things. And we're going to reflect on some of that today. But before we do, would you bow with me and let's ask God's blessing. Thank you, Lord, for how you have created a journey for all of us along life's way. And we're glad that journey led us here to this worship center, to this place that many have given their lives to Jesus, where we have served you and worked for you, and we have seen miraculous things take place. We come today to worship you, and we ask that your Spirit might touch our hearts and our minds. Thank you for the opportunity to tell your story, and also to encourage each family that makes choices for their children, because we're building for eternity, and we ask that you give us success as we make commitments to you. We invite your presence, and we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Every city has a particular kind of character that they're known for. I was glad to be from Birmingham, Alabama. It was called the Magic City. And I didn't know what that meant for a while, but the Magic City was something that it grew up overnight because of the iron and steel industry. And of course, Huntsville, Alabama. I heard about Huntsville most all of my life. They would always talk about Huntsville. It was known as the watercress capital of the world. How many of you knew that statistic? Oh yeah, there's a few of you out there that knew that, yeah. But it changed its identity when a group of German scientists came to this city, and most of them settled just a couple blocks over from where this church is. I know this because when we came to Huntsville on our second tour, we moved into a home that was built and owned by the scientist that built the motor that goes in the Saturn V rocket. When I found that out from the neighbors, they said, oh yeah, this community is loaded with German families. They had their own market, and that's where I bought our groceries. I love that historical part of it. And, we knew Huntsville became the Rocket City, and it had a ring to it. You even named your Pathfinders a little bit, gave it that theme, the Huntsville Spacewalkers. And I was able to see those spacewalkers marching in the parade just last Sabbath as they attended the Southern Union Pathfinder Camporee. There were over 5,000 that were there, and the spacewalkers looked sharp, they looked good. You would have been proud to see them. I was proud to be able to wear a Pathfinder uniform with the spacewalkers on it. I did challenge them a little bit. I said, where are the drums that I borrowed from the Hueytown Church in Birmingham, Alabama? They said, well, as long as we don't have a Pathfinder club, you're welcome to them. And so we brought them up here. That's only because a member of this church, Hubert Beverly, knew where they were and took ownership, and he brought them up here, and the next thing you know, it had Huntsville Spacewalkers on the bass drum. Well, that's a little bit of the nostalgia that surrounds this great city, but especially this church. And 1979 was a grand year. The school up here, Audubon Heights, was bursting at the seams. They had a great number of students that were there, a full staff. But, just like they must have been praying the prayer of Jabez because they wanted to expand and get bigger. And that's our goal, isn't it? We want to expand our influence in the community, and it was working. We're going to break ground, and we're going to build new and better things for our children and for our community. But the Lord has an interesting way of playing history out. And the next thing you know, the pastor, there was a parsonage right up the hill, and the pastor was there, and suddenly the ground's being broken, and the neighbors, they wanted a meeting. They were upset. They didn't want what those in this church wanted. And you can read the history, but the word variance was a word that everybody became familiar with because the one that they had hired hadn't made sure that all the ducks were in a row. And so they went to the city council and were turned down. What are you to do? This is where we have invested. This is what we want. This is where our vision is. What's going to happen? It kind of reminds you a little bit of the God's servant Abram. In the book of Hebrews, in the Hall of Faith, Abram is remembered because the first thing that he did is he obeyed God and went out into an area that he didn't know. Isn't that the story of faith for all of us that God would have us know? Is that I want you to go further and to expand farther and to experience things that you probably are reluctant to do. Wouldn't you know that it became a notice that there were going to be these public schools that were going to be put up for auction. And everybody got excited again. All right, here's an opportunity. And the closest one is going to be over there in the Big Cove area. And they got the clearance from the conference dignitaries that you can go this far, but no further in the investment. And they found out, oh, the auction is going to be on Sabbath. You can see there's always a little bit of faith. There's a little bit of discontent saying, oh no, I don't want that challenge. But the challenge was there. And lo and behold, someone came up with the idea, oh, I have an answer, a solution that people in the community want us there, and they're willing to make the bid for us on the Sabbath. Well, immediately is that the solution, or is that just another conflict? And they resolved that if this thing was going to be done, we're going to look for the Lord's hand in it. And so they said, no, we're not going that way. And wouldn't you know, a week before came out that they're going to have this auction for this school on Thursday night. Whoa, the Lord's working. You know, you say, what are you going to do? Well, how many of God's saints have asked that question? How many people like Abram have said, Lord, where am I supposed to go? You're supposed to leave this land and to a place that I will show you. And so he took his family. It had to be hard for Abram, wasn't it? To pick up and leave his family. You know, this morning I got up and I went to, say goodbye to my mother. And she said, don't go. At 94 years, I want to hold on. You know, it's kind of hard when family's doing that. And I'm sure there were a lot of people that held on to Abram and said, don't go. You know, you're deserting the family. But he followed and obeyed God, and it's recorded in Hebrews, the 11th chapter, that it was a faith experience that he did that. Well, the experience and the blessing and the miracle of Big Cove is that we're going to be able to have a time in which we can make the bid. But there's somebody else bidding on it too. And there's plenty of prayer that went up. Is this thing going to happen? Is this have the Lord's stamp of approval? You can't go over 152,000. So, the Lord's kind of fun that way. I'm going to let it go right up. Hold on. A great member of this church, Richard Phillips, was the one that was the designated one. Of course, he had experience with school. He was a school administrator in this county. And the bid was for 150,000. And Richard didn't hesitate. He went 151.5. And they quit the bidding. And the school was ours. That was a Thursday night. They didn't know how much damage had happened because the school had been kind of fallow there and unused. And so they went in and they found minimal damage that they could repair. When will you start school? We're starting on Monday. How about that? Was that not a miracle of Big Cove that the members of this church have as a legacy, as a history, as an act of faith and partnering with God to see His hand work in their behalf? To put and plant this educational facility in this valley that was really rural. Oh yeah, where do you get your groceries over in Big Cove back in 1979? Well, we got to go over the mountain if we're going to get something to eat. It's just, humble people living out there. Well, when I came in 1981, I had the experience of going out there, and the pastor couldn't wait to tell me the story. I was as new and fresh with, all the book learning that you can get from reading the BBs. That's what they call them, Barth, Bruner, Bultmann, Bonhoeffer. These were all great theologians, but, You know, the application up in Andrews is difficult because you're snowed in. You go to the library and you go back and go back and go back. But I came to Huntsville in the springtime. It was the 1st of April. Woo! You know, it gets pretty around here that time. And we were excited and so forth. He says, let's go out to Big Cove. And we went out there and we met the kids. And it was fun. And the principal, Principal Dale, said, come out and play with us. So I went out and played. I didn't have a glove. We were out there. The grass was kind of growing up pretty good. I said, well, we've got to make sure we get the grass cut. So they hit a ball. They put me out there in the field. That's where they usually put people. We don't know what kind of talent they have. And the principal looked forward to it. He was athletic, and he hit the ball in my direction in a fly. I had no glove, and I stuck out my hand and caught it. It stuck to my hand. And all right, that, you know, nothing like something like that to impress students. And when they invited me back for Jennifer's and Roddy's 8th grade graduation, Roddy introduced me. He said, that's what I remember, is that he caught the ball with his bare hand. Well, you know, miracles happen all the time. So I just counted that as an opportunity to make an impression. And teachers and all of you that have invested your time, oh, let me tell you, it has made an impact in the lives of the children that have attended that school. I'm glad to be a part of its history, and you have not let it drop. I got to drive over there this morning, look around, and I said, these people have not let the vision and the miracle that God performed go to waste. It's a beautiful facility, and it looks good because Hampton Cove came along, and along comes Publix. It's the #1 place in all of Alabama. They said, this is where we're going to build in Alabama first, was right there in the Cove. And Walmart comes, and then beautiful homes and beautiful community. And before all of that, the Lord says, I'm going to plant a school, and I'm going to partner with the people here at Central, and we're going to have a light in that community. I'm so proud that y'all have that as a history. It doesn't mean that it hasn't been challenging and difficult since then. Look at Abram. He goes out and he said, oh, everywhere I go, it seems like people are, wanting to steal my wife. And I'm going to have to lie and do this, that, and the other. But the Lord saved him in every situation. And he didn't have a regular place to live. He lived in a tent because he was a sojourner. And he remained there. But the promise was secure in his mind because the Lord took him out there and says, I am going to bless you, and I'm going to make you a blessing. And everyone that blesses you, I will bless. And everyone that curses you, I will curse. He says, but you are the agent by which I am going to pour out my blessing. And I'm glad that he has put you in a place where that blessing can be fulfilled, both here in Huntsville on this side of the mountain and also over in the Cove where the school exists. I am glad that God brings adversity into our lives because it creates us to have faith and develop our faith in a great way. And every time that we're able to meet as a board and work on issues, God is going to reward every board member that has labored and given their time, to try to follow His will. He's going to bless you for it. And for every teacher that answered the call of duty and had to stand before that board, God is going to bless you even more. And I'm grateful that some of those teachers are here, and I look out at Christy, and I want you to thank you personally for answering God's call at that early time in your career when we needed you. And my son to this day, his name is Ross. He's a pastor and in Spartanburg. I listen to him every Sabbath afternoon because they put it up on YouTube. And I get to listen to him talk about Big Cove and his favorite teacher and his mother's cooking and his experience here, because this was the first school. In fact, all three of my children went to Big Cove. And so I'm grateful that they have that. And I have not heard them say a negative word about their experience. In fact, they didn't want to come. They didn't want to come from Carolina down here to Huntsville. They didn't know anything about Huntsville, Alabama. And but the Lord miraculously called us because, I was pretty settled with what I was doing. But He called us down here, and our children beat us up like children can do. And we don't want to go where our friends are here. And let me tell you, when we left Huntsville, they beat us up again. Why, our friends are here in Huntsville. I'm glad that you extended your friendship and love to them, and they remember it with great affection. So what does the future look like? What does Christian education have to offer? It seems like we should be bursting at the seams, with all of this miraculous history that we have. And yet it seems like that we kind of stay at a certain level because we know we have a truth for the end times in the message of the Adventist Church. We also have a mission to go to the world with that. And yet we kind of stay focused on, let's just kind of stay where we are. And that's, if you read the statistics on our church, we're kind of just holding on. There's not this burst of energy and evangelism that we had once known. And I got to thinking a lot about that, is that Abram, he received the promise of the Lord, didn't he? He said, I'm gonna give you children and descendants that are so big you can't count them in the stars or in the sand on the beach. I get excited hearing that kind of thing. The Lord is going to give you this. And Abram lived with that for a long time, didn't he? And he had a conversation with the Lord. And he was like, okay, hey, listen, I'm not what I was. And I have nothing to show for it. And God just renewed His promise, didn't He? He says, I'm going to do these things. And I love this part about Hebrews in the 11th chapter. It says, by faith Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child when she was past the age because she judged him faithful who had promised. Now she laughed when she first heard it, but it is to her credit that she deemed it, she judged that him faithful who had promised it. And then it follows with this. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born as many as the stars of the sky in multitude, innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. God has a way of saying, hey, my promise is good. For every one of you that is out there praying for the school and for the students, and especially for the teachers that stand up every day before their students, God is going to reward you, and His promise is sure and good. Because Adventist Christian education offers something that is long-lasting. I'm grateful that I started in a one-room school, and I'm grateful for every teacher that I had. But I'm also thankful for the adversity that came along the way as well. It helped us recognize that God still works, and He's going to see us through and see the success that He had promised be fulfilled. I was glad that there were different ones during our time here that would come over to the school and said, we're not members of your church, but we'd like for our children to attend your school. And they were, by faith, were reaching out as well. I'm glad God created some moments, that they put their children here, but there's not as much interaction. We're not seeing them at church, but we create opportunities. And that opportunity came the Super Bowl of 1995. I remember it because that's when my youngest son became a Green Bay Packer fan. And he played in that game when he was only in the 3rd grade. Of course, his older brother was the quarterback. He knew he was going to get a pass or two. We wanted it to be a beautiful day for the Super Bowl. But in Huntsville, Alabama, the temperature was very cold. It was not freezing, but it felt like it. It was pouring down rain. And we had scheduled a warm-up to the Super Bowl between the fathers and sons at Big Cove Christian Academy. The field had been lined, everything was prepared, the grass was mowed. And for every one of you that has taken a turn on the tractor out there to mow that grass, I'm thinking Sheila Evans has probably put in more time on a tractor out there mowing grass than any of us. May God bless you for that. Whoever mowed it this week, they did a great job. It looks beautiful out there. But on that day, it was rain, and the grass was not as thick and rich as it was back then, so there were muddy parts. But we played in that game. I believe Randy Bishop played in that game. And we were out there. No, Randy, you were the hockey guy. You weren't in that game. I'm sorry. Roddy could have used you that day because he was there. But we lined up, and those fathers that were not members of our church, they came out. They were cold. They were undaunted. They said, we're ready to play. And they were ready to show their sons, we still got it. I remember a lot of you were out there too. And some of them had colds. Some of them had fevers. But I remember that those guys were wanting to play. And they came out there and, just because I organized it didn't mean that I was in charge of whether they could play or not. And grandmothers and mothers say, you need to cancel this. I said, we do not cancel football games. We play in the mud. We have the tradition of Alabama. We play under any circumstances. And we went out there and we slopped around, and we talk about it to this day because those men, who I believe were children at heart, they played like it was the Super Bowl. They didn't let those young boys get 1 inch that they didn't earn. It was a successful day and well remembered. We came in and shared, we had a meal, and then we sat down and watched the Super Bowl. And we had connection with the community. There have been lots of opportunities to connect with the community over there in Big Cove, and here as well. I hope that you will never forget the mission of this church is to take the gospel into all the world. Everybody's got a story. I know the McCleary story. I heard it before I even got here. And I'm glad that I'm in a work now as a hospital chaplain. I get to hear people's story every day. They tell me stories. All I have to do is, they're there in the hospital for a reason. And if I hear them use the word the Lord or prayer or anything that is close to Christianity, I'd say, oh, you have an experience. Tell me your story. We all have a story, don't we? And I believe that Christian education is valuable in this day and age for us for three reasons: that our teachers offer something that they don't have in public schools. I don't even know that they offer all of it in other Christian schools. But this one concept I think is so important. I didn't understand it as much until I got into this hospital ministry, and that is that, number one, I want the children that go to our schools to know that there is a God and that He is the creator of our life and He has a plan for our life. Do not think that everybody grows up with that concept and accepts it. And I hope that our young people will challenge that, and many do. I want to see God's hand, and I want to test whether there is a God. As Abraham was willing to encounter experience with his God and say, where are my descendants? Where is the blessing? Where is the promise fulfilled? I believe that our teachers have the opportunity to tell them and describe for them and speak of God. You don't get that in other situations. I also want them to be able to practically apply the things that they're learning. Not just say, this is in a book and this is what it says and this is the correct answer. But if they can make a practical application. Let me tell you, this church helped me apply anything that I ever learned in school. I came here and the pastor moved on within a month. I'm fresh out of seminary. I'm in an intellectual community. This church has more degreed members than I had experienced other places. You're smart people, and it comes through beautifully. That gives every advantage to a church if you're able to practically apply it. And that's what I learned from you, is how to practically apply it. Our children that are in our schools need to understand that when we talk about God, we need to be able to apply it. It's kind of like when they're going into algebra, they go, I'm never going to be able to use this. What would I ever use algebra for? Your good teachers will say, oh, well, let's apply this to food or to travel. And so, how much gas do I need to put into my car that on a trip, let's say that there's an oil shortage and I'm not able to, how much money do I need to get from here to there? To practically apply that and go, I don't know, I just stop at a station and get gas. No, if you start to use those principles, you'll say, you're going to need to know some of this stuff. And when a student says, why do we have to study Bible? We go to church. Why do we have to study Bible in school? Do you have an answer for that? I was challenged in a classroom with that. Why? It was the son of our pastor. As a chaplain there at the academy, I said, number one, that's a good question. There are no bad questions, especially when they come from a heart of someone that is searching to apply what they have heard about God all their life and told that I have to do this and to do that. Where is the practical application that God is doing anything in our life? Why should I follow Him? And that's what Abram was able to tell his sons and say, this is where God has led me. This is where God has saved me. This is where God will defend me when I'm in trouble. Do we have a story to tell about what God is doing in our life? Teachers have that experience. Seventh-day Adventist teachers know that it is a challenge and that they have accepted this responsibility, not because it pays great dividends financially, because to work with a church and a school board and a church board is an act of faith on our teachers. And so I'm glad that they're willing to step out in faith and accept that responsibility, because it's not all what they tell them at the school. It's not until they get into a teaching situation. Bless them for that. And if they know that experience, they can answer these questions and challenge these kids. Oh, I hope that you are practically applying the things on a spiritual level, a physical level, a social level, that they see that God is working in my life. They will have that to draw on. And even though our young people may take an avenue outside of what we want, we actually want our children to say, listen, I want to go out and experience life. You have given them a relationship with God. You've told them how to apply it to practical life. But the third thing is, have you taught them to pray? Our Sabbath school teachers, you're supposed to be doing it in the home. But if you get the opportunity in Sabbath school or at school to learn how to pray, they will be able to face the challenges that come before them, that they will have a place that they can go, Lord, I don't know about the experience that I'm experiencing right now. I don't see a way out. But I remember hearing the story and the miracle of Big Cove. When there wasn't a place, God provided a place. When it was in contradiction to a teaching of the church and it was on the Sabbath day, He provided a way out when there wasn't a way out. Can you tell them a story from your life? This is how the Lord has saved me. It will make the biggest difference. Especially when they go out into the world and say, listen, I didn't have a good experience here. I didn't have a good experience there. But I want you to know, when they get in trouble, they're going to remember and they're going to call on the name of the Lord. I see it every day in the hospital. People that tell me, well, I went to church, but I don't know. Is the Lord He's not going to listen to me now. I've never prayed before. And you get to lead them in that prayer. Let me tell you, you can come to the end, you can be in the Adventist church. You could hear the message week after week and not have learned to pray. How can that be? On Sunday, a member who lived well into her late 80s, she passed away this last week, and they're having a service. I'm here to tell you that I'm happy at the time of her passing that a friend of hers felt compelled to go and see her in her home. Now, this lady's husband had not allowed any friends to come into the home. No. But she kept calling for this lady's soup. And so she brought it to her. And this is an elder in our church. And she said, she felt compelled. I need to talk to this person, but her family's all here. And then suddenly, all the family went into the kitchen. And she saw her friend there. And she said, we've known each other a long time, and I just want to make sure that your relationship with the Lord, is good. And she said, it's not. She said, well, let's pray right now. Do you want to be in that right relationship, in that saved relationship with God? And she says, I've been coming to this church all the time, but I really don't pay much attention. She says, do you want that? And she says, I do. Well, let's pray. She says, I don't know how to pray. Been in the church, gone to our schools, doesn't know how to pray. Our challenge is to make sure everyone has that opportunity. And this elder led her in prayer. And she says, bring my family in because I want us to pray together. And she was able, in her last hours, to pray for her family. Just learn to pray. Prayed for her family and prayed to the Lord that she would be in right relationship with Him. Having her funeral. That opportunity is there all the time. My classmates, I don't call them enough. But, they had a job opportunity that I was interested in, a chaplain's position. And so I was told to call him. So I called him. He said, I'm so glad that you called. He said, you're only he says, I haven't been to the church in 20 years. 20 years? He says, yeah, that's when I went into this. I wanted to get away from it all. He says, but there have been 2 that have continued to call, and now you're the 3rd. And I'm saying, all right, I'm going to spread the word that this person is open to us calling. You think of those that you have gone to school with or gone to church with. Is your list out there? Now, you may be praying for them, but you call them until they say, don't call, or I just love it when you call. Because you're going to hear the words from them, don't go. Like my mother said to me, they are going through adversity and they need a phone call from you. The Big Cove miracle and the Big Cove blessing is that he put it there. He put that school there for a reason, for us to bless others. The same as he put this church here. Rally to the response. Know this, that God, there is a God, and you know Him. That you have been able to apply that knowledge of God, and that you know how to pray. If you do those things, you teach your children those things, you have prepared them for the time when Jesus will come. We allow them to make those choices, but I'm still praying the prayer. If my children should turn away, I know that He's going to make a way for them to connect with this church. Look for it. It's happening. And I see it all the time with a phone call. Suddenly they're there in church. I know you're going to see it as well. May God bless you as you celebrate your homecoming together this weekend. Y'all have done a good work. Continue to do these things. And I know the Lord is going to be able to celebrate. It'll be one of the great stories that takes place when we there in heaven together. But until then, let's just continue the good work that we're doing. Put to mind those things and those places and those people that have made a connection with you. It's going to be a fun time, a great reunion in heaven. So, as every school has, there's a call at the beginning of the day where they look at, who's here and who's not here. When the call is made up yonder, I hope that you'll be there. Let's sing that together in closing.